It was late Sunday evening, and the house felt strangely still. The kind of quiet where you can hear the fridge humming and the clock ticking in the hall. Then I heard the front door click open, and there was Mark, suitcase trailing behind him, flashing that tired but charming smile he always wore after a long business trip. He looked rumpled, worn out, like a man who'd been trapped in endless meetings. He kissed my cheek and started telling me how exhausting it all had been, how he could barely keep his eyes open. I laughed softly, relieved to have him back, ready for his usual little stories from the road. We headed to the bedroom together, chatting as I unzipped his suitcase. Out came neatly folded shirts. Mark had never been this tidy before I met him. Then his toiletries, a paperback with the corner turned down, a crumpled city map. My hand reached in again and brushed against something silky. I pulled it out slowly, and my heart stopped. A lacy bra. Black. Delicate. Not mine. Not even close to my size. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation, but my stomach dropped before I could find one. Trying to keep my voice steady, I held it up. "Whose is this?" I asked. Mark's laugh came a little too fast, a little too light. "Oh, must have been a laundry mix-up at the hotel," he said, like it was nothing. I watched him for a beat longer than usual, searching his face for even the tiniest crack. He smiled, but something between us shifted right then. Something I couldn't name yet, but I could feel it in my bones. I slipped the bra back into the suitcase, pretending to brush it off the way he wanted me to. But my mind was already replaying the moment over and over, like a record stuck on the same scratch. A laundry mix-up? Sure. Maybe if it had been a plain white t-shirt or a pair of socks. But this? This was intimate. This was chosen. And I couldn't shake the image of someone else's hands folding it, someone else's body wearing it. I smiled faintly, nodding along to whatever story Mark was spinning, but I wasn't really listening anymore. He went on about his meetings, the long hours, the networking dinners that ran late into the night. Every word felt suddenly loaded, each detail making me question what else might be buried under the surface. I caught the faintest scent on his shirt. Sweet, floral, not my perfume. It clung to him in a way that didn't feel accidental. My chest tightened, but I kept my tone light, tossing in the occasional, "Oh, really?" so he wouldn't see how my thoughts were unraveling. When he finally wandered off toward the shower, whistling like nothing was wrong, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment. My hands rested in my lap, but inside I was gripping the truth, whatever it was, like a blade I wasn't ready to show. I told myself it could wait. I told myself I needed to be sure. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to fade away with a good night's sleep. Something had been set in motion and I wasn't about to stop it. The sound of the shower started up in the bathroom, muffled by the closed door. I sat there for a moment, staring at the suitcase, my mind running in 100 directions. The bra wasn't just a piece of clothing, it was a message, and I didn't know if it had been left for me to find or hidden carelessly, assuming I wouldn't look. Either way, it was careless. Either way, it spoke louder than any excuse he'd just given me. I started unpacking the rest of his things, more for the motion than for necessity. Each item felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying a secret with it. I thought about all the years we'd been together, the trust I'd built in him brick by brick, and how one moment, a scrap of lace, had cracked the foundation in ways I couldn't yet measure. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. What I felt was sharper, colder, the beginning of clarity. When he finally came out, hair damp and smelling of soap, he smiled at me like nothing in the world was wrong. I smiled back, tucking away the storm in my chest. This wasn't the time. Not tonight. I knew that if I waited, if I listened and watched, I'd find the truth on my own terms. And when I did, I wouldn't just confront him. I'd make sure he regretted underestimating me. By morning, The unease had settled into something heavier, like a stone lodged in my chest. Mark moved around the kitchen making coffee, humming to himself, while I sat at the table pretending to scroll through my phone. Every word he said sounded perfectly normal, but now I was hearing them differently, like I was listening for static behind the music. He left for work with a kiss on my forehead, and I watched him walk out the door, my mind already circling back to the bra. That night, when he stepped into the shower, I knew I couldn't just sit there wondering. I reached for his jacket draped over the chair and started checking the pockets. My hands felt steady, but inside, my heart was pounding. That's when I found it, a folded receipt from the hotel bar. 2 cocktails, a bottle of champagne, dessert for 2. My breath caught, and I stared at it like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. But it didn't. I set the paper on the dresser, my fingers grazing the faint perfume on one of his shirts. It was stronger now, unmistakable, like a ghost in the fabric. I didn't recognize the scent, but I knew it didn't belong to me. A wave of cold washed over me, not from shock, but from confirmation. Something was wrong, and whatever it was, he was keeping it from me. I folded the receipt carefully, almost tenderly, and slipped it into my own drawer, right next to the bra I'd hidden the night before. Seeing them together felt powerful, like pieces of a puzzle only I knew existed. I could have marched into the bathroom, thrown open the door, and demanded answers right then. But what would that give me? A lie? Maybe 2, wrapped in the same careless charm he always used to smooth things over. No. If I was going to confront him, I needed more than suspicion. I needed undeniable proof. When he came out of the shower, steam curling around him, he started talking about some funny thing that happened at work. I nodded and smiled, pretending to listen, every muscle in my face holding its place like I was made of porcelain. Inside, though, something had shifted. The balance of power between us had tilted, and he didn't even notice. He thought I was in the same place I'd been yesterday, trusting, unguarded. He couldn't have been more wrong. That night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling while his breathing slowed into sleep. My mind was already planning, mapping out the next steps. I'd watch. I'd wait. And when I moved, it wouldn't be out of impulse. It would be calculated. I wanted him caught so completely that not even his best story could save him. The next morning, I woke before him, just lying there, studying his face in the dim light. He looked peaceful, almost boyish, like someone who didn't have a care in the world. It was strange, seeing him like that while knowing what I knew. I wondered if he felt any flicker of guilt at all, or if the lies came so naturally now that they didn't even register. He stirred, smiled, and kissed my cheek before heading for the shower, and I realized he had no idea the ground beneath him was shifting. As soon as the water started running, I got up and opened my drawer again. The bra. The receipt. I ran my fingers over them, memorizing their presence like a secret I could feel under my skin. These weren't just random objects anymore. They were evidence, seeds of a truth that would, sooner or later, sprout into something undeniable. I wasn't afraid of what I'd find next. I was ready for it. By the time he stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, I was smiling, offering him coffee like everything was fine. And it was fine. For now. Because the longer I stayed quiet, the more space I had to listen, to observe, to catch the little cracks in his stories. Something told me the next slip-up was coming. And when it did, I'd be ready to catch it before it hit the floor. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of quiet, ordinary start to the day where nothing feels like it's about to change. Mark was in the shower, steam already fogging up the bathroom mirror, when I reached for his phone on the nightstand. My excuse was ready if he caught me. Just checking the time. But my heart was pounding so loudly it felt like it could give me away. I unlocked it with his passcode, the one I'd known for years, and scrolled straight to his messages. One contact stood out immediately. The name was male, but the tone of the texts was not. Flirtatious, teasing, dripping with the kind of intimacy you don't fake. I scrolled further, my stomach tightening with every line. The words were explicit, private in a way that made me feel like an intruder, except I had every right to be there. Then I saw it, a photo of the bra, the same one sitting in my drawer. My hands went cold. Beneath it, her message read, "Can't wait for you to take this off me again." I didn't react, not outwardly. I just kept scrolling, every message tightening the knot in my chest until it felt hard to breathe. And yet, with each word, I felt less like a victim and more like someone sharpening a blade. This wasn't a maybe anymore, this was proof. And now I knew exactly where the power sat, right in my hands. I started taking photos, quick, precise, making sure every message, every timestamp, every image was captured. My hands didn't shake. In fact, I felt strangely calm, like I'd crossed a threshold where anger had given way to clarity. I saved everything to a hidden folder on my own phone, double-checking each shot before deleting my traces from his. The sound of the shower water was steady, almost hypnotic, like it was marking the seconds I had left before he stepped out. As I worked, my mind was already racing ahead. This wasn't going to be a quiet confrontation in our kitchen, or a whispered argument behind closed doors. No, that would be too easy for him. Too private. I wanted something he couldn't spin, couldn't soften with charm, something that would strip away the mask he wore so effortlessly. And for that, I'd need timing, precision, and an audience. By the time I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, my plan had started to take shape. It wasn't complete yet, but the bones were there. I wasn't just going to catch him. I was going to make sure everyone who mattered to him knew exactly who he really was. The shower shut off, and I moved quickly, sliding under the covers like I'd never left. My breathing slowed, my eyes half closed, as if I'd been lazily waiting for him all along. He came out, towel around his waist, running his fingers through damp hair. "Morning," he said, with that casual warmth I'd once loved so much. I smiled back, tucking my phone out of sight, my secrets locked away where he'd never think to look. Inside, though, I was electric, wired with the thrill of knowing I'd just pulled the curtain back on his entire act. Every word he'd said to me since coming home now had a double meaning. Every touch felt like it belonged to a stranger. And yet, I played along, my laughter easy, my tone soft. Let him think I was still in the dark. That was the beauty of it. He'd never see me coming. As I handed him his coffee, I was already picturing the moment it would all fall apart for him. The stunned look, the silence in the room, the way the truth would land like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples everywhere. It wouldn't just be my satisfaction, it would be my justice. And now, the countdown had begun. A week later, the stage was set. Literally. I'd planned it down to the smallest detail, right down to the flowers on the table and the perfect wine to serve. I called it a welcome back dinner for Mark, a sweet little gathering so friends and family could hear about his trip. He thought it was my way of celebrating him, of making up for the time apart. And that was exactly what I wanted him to believe. That evening, the living room buzzed with voices and clinking glasses. His mother was there, his sister, 2 of his closest friends, and a few of mine. Mark was in his element, laughing, telling stories about late-night meetings and city views, looking every bit the devoted husband and hardworking man. I watched him, my smile fixed in place, my heart steady. I'd learned something over the past week. Power feels a lot like patience. Dinner moved along easily, conversation flowing, plates being passed, and then, right on cue, I stood up. "Before dessert," I said, my voice warm and casual, I have a little something for you, honey. Something you left in your luggage. His eyes flickered with confusion, just for a second, before settling back into that easy grin. That single flicker told me everything. He knew. I walked to the sideboard and picked up a beautifully wrapped gift box. Gold paper, silk ribbon, the kind of presentation that promised something sentimental inside. The room quieted, all eyes on me. I placed it in front of him, my fingers brushing the lid. "Go ahead," I said, keeping my voice light, almost teasing. "Open it." He hesitated for just a fraction too long before untying the ribbon. The paper fell away, and when he lifted the lid, his smile froze. Inside, resting neatly on tissue paper, was the black lacy bra. Next to it, the hotel bar receipt, and on top, the printed screenshots of those texts. Every word, every timestamp, every photo. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the weight of the air shift. Mark's eyes darted from the box to me, then to the guests, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for the right script. This isn't, he stammered, but his voice faltered. And in that moment, I didn't need to say another word. His performance had ended, and everyone had just watched the curtain drop. Before he could recover, his mother's chair scraped against the floor. She stood up slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "I think we've heard enough," she said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the heavy silence. The statement landed like a gavel, final and undeniable. Mark's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him before it even began. Around the table, no one moved. No one rushed to defend him. I stayed standing, my hands resting lightly on the back of my chair, meeting each person's gaze in turn. I wasn't looking for sympathy, and I wasn't here to explain myself. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. Mark avoided my eyes, staring down at the table like the wood grain could swallow him whole. The man who thrived on being the center of attention was now the centerpiece for all the wrong reasons. I took my seat again, letting the conversation stumble back in hesitant bursts, the kind people use when they're trying to pretend the world hasn't just shifted. But I wasn't pretending. I'd done what I came to do. And now, all that was left was to decide how, and when, I'd walk away for good. I didn't wait until morning. The moment the last guest left and the front door clicked shut, I walked to the bedroom, pulled my pre-packed suitcase from the closet, and set it on the bed. Mark trailed behind me, his voice low, trying to explain, to twist the story into something it wasn't. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at him. My focus was on the zipper, on the weight of my things neatly folded inside. I'd been ready for this moment since the day I found that bra. By the time he realized I wasn't bluffing, I had my coat on and my keys in my hand. "Sophie, wait," he started, but his words felt hollow, like they belonged to a man who knew the fight was already lost. I stepped into the hallway without another glance, the air outside cool against my skin, the night strangely quiet after the chaos we'd just left behind. I drove to my new apartment, the lease signed days ago, the fridge already stocked, the bed already made. Freedom didn't feel like fireworks, it felt like peace. And peace was something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until now. The fallout started faster than I expected. By the next afternoon, my phone buzzed with messages from friends, some pretending they hadn't heard, others bluntly asking if it was true. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The story was already moving on its own, weaving through our circle, stripping away the image Mark had worked so hard to protect. I imagined him, pacing in that house, scrambling for a version of events that might salvage his pride. I spent the day unpacking slowly, savoring the quiet of my new place. Every drawer I filled, every picture I hung on the wall, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten I owned. There was no scent of unfamiliar perfume here, no suitcase hiding secrets. Just my things, my space, my rules. The absence of him wasn't a void, it was a clearing, wide and open, waiting for something better. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the small balcony, watching the city lights blink to life. Somewhere out there, he was learning how quickly a lie can unravel. And me? I was learning how light it feels when you finally set down a weight you've been carrying too long. The next morning, I opened my drawer and pulled out the bra one last time. It didn't feel heavy anymore, just a relic from a chapter I was glad to close. I placed it in a donation bag, along with a few old clothes, and dropped it off at a charity bin on my way to the beach. Let someone else decide its next story. Mine with it was over. Later, I sat on the sand, my shoes off, the sunset painting the horizon in gold and pink. I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture of the waves, and typed a caption for my social media. One man's mistake is another woman's freedom. Cheers to starting over. I hit post, smiled, and tucked the phone away. It wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. A reminder that I'd walked through the fire and come out lighter. As the tide crept closer, I closed my eyes and breathed in the salt air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to look over my shoulder or question the truth in someone's voice. I was alone, yes, but I was free. And freedom, I realized, was the most beautiful thing I could ever wear.